All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Football Podcast. Today we're going to be having a little discussion about some of the happenings of the league and each providing 5 players who we think will have breakout seasons in 2025. Let's get started.
Alrighty. Let's kick this into full gear. We're going to be talking a little bit about what happened in the week.
Well, not really.
I froze. I couldn't handle the pressure.
We're keeping that in. We're keeping that in.
I completely lost my train of thought. I was like, wait. And then I looked at you like, wait, what are we doing?
No, so we're actually
gosh.
not really talking about what's going on in the league because guess what? There's really nothing going on in terms of news unless we want to talk about Tyler Boyd potentially saying that he'd come out of retirement to play with the Steelers, or not retirement, but sign with the Steelers. So that's where we're at right now. We're in the middle of the dead period of the offseason. Zach Wilson got married. That's where I'm at in my NFL news cycle.
How old was she?
No. An appropriate age.
Okay.
She's mature beyond her years.
She has an old soul.
So one of the things, because of Travis Kelce's tight end university that he hosts, it's had Travis Kelce back in the news cycle alongside Taylor Swift. And it feels like, this isn't part of the discussion, this is a little side note, it feels like the Taylor Swift buzz is finally starting to die down a little bit, which is nice. It's not like every single time she appears anywhere in an NFL related thing, it's like, what? A woman? And football? I'm going to end it all. That felt like where the discussion was at for the last, 2 years. But it did get me thinking, what is Travis Kelce going to look like in 2025? And I think his previous season it's interesting because in terms of yardage, yes, he had a below 1,000-yard season, but still 823 yards paired with only 3 touchdowns. I feel like it was the touchdowns number that a lot of fantasy football discourse started to sour on Kelce. And I just kind of want to get your thoughts, because obviously I'm coming at it from the perspective of a Chiefs fan, on what Travis Kelce is going to look like.
Yeah, I think that what we're going to see from Travis Kelce as he kind of declines until he retires is just less games where he just goes crazy. Because even when you look at like his career, especially within the last few years, but he would like be okay, but then like really crazy. Like he always cooked the Chargers, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So weekly he was pretty inconsistent, but cumulatively that would end up being really impressive seasons, and he always seemed to be able to turn it up in the playoffs with his connection with Patrick Mahomes. And so in my mind, really what we're going to start seeing is just less and less of those really crazy games where he goes for, 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. And so that's kind of where I see it. I think that as long as Mahomes is the guy throwing him the football, there is kind of a floor there that
yes,
like maybe people kind of underrate. But in terms of like, how do I think he's going to do next year? I just don't think he's going to have as many big games, because I feel like that's kind of what he was missing last year.
Yeah, I think, and part of that is, my perspective on that would be, I agree. And I think at this point in his career, that's almost purposeful, because he only has so many of those games in the tank that he has to save for certain moments. I don't think that we're ever going to get another 1,000+ yard season from Travis Kelce at this point. I would be shocked if Travis Kelce doesn't have at least somewhere between 6 to 7 touchdowns this season.
Yeah.
which doesn't sound like a lot, but it would be double what he had last season. Again, that was the weirdest part of the production, is looking up and there, you would have like a 5-week stretch where Travis Kelce didn't have a touchdown. And that was, I mean, that's literally been the first time experiencing that as a as a Chiefs fan since his rookie season. I mean, that's how consistently incredible he's been. So I think a lot of what he's going to do is almost be a decoy in a sense, because he
Yeah.
still objectively, even last season, scares a secondary.
Yeah.
Secondaries fear leaving him on, or having him put someone onto an island. And so you're probably going to have a season that's similar to last year in terms of yardage, where it's probably going to be around 800 receiving yards. But my guess is that the touchdown production goes up, because a lot of what happens uh, when you're at this later end of your career and you're tight end, a lot of times the touchdowns are just kind of the luck of the moment, where it's like you didn't get a target here, or the game plan worked elsewhere. So
Yeah.
it might not even be that Travis Kelce is going to be markedly better than last season. He might even be, just due to age, worse, but the stat line might actually improve. He's at that point in his career.
I could see a world where his receptions goes down just because Rashi Rice is returning. And
Yes.
then I also think that he, like, in terms of his actual play on the field, it kind of seems like one of the reasons why Kelce was so special is because even if you double teamed him, right? Like, even if you
Oh,
dedicated
yeah.
a linebacker and a corner to him, it seems like he was still able to get open. I think part of that was just because, like, relative to his size, he was incredibly athletic. But then I think a large part of that really was just because he's able to read the defenses. Like, an example that comes to mind is, I can't remember the year off the top of my head, but it was like the classic, like, 13 seconds game where the Chiefs beat the Bills, and I
Yeah,
think
the
the divisional
2021
round.
divisional. Yeah.
Yeah. Where, everyone who's watching the game is like, watch Kelce. And he just goes right to the exact soft spot on that defense. Patrick Mahomes finds him, and they're able to get into field goal range. And so that superpower, I don't know if that's ever really going to go away. But in terms of the ability, like the other reason why that was so effective, though, is because he was able to beat double teams, which created incredible disadvantages for the defense related to
Yeah.
covering other guys on the team. That wrinkle and that aspect, I think I didn't really see it as much last year, if
Oh,
that makes
100.
sense.
That is
Like
very
no
much
longer
true.
do you have to double team Travis Kelce, is basically what I'm saying. You still have to dedicate resources to it, but he's not creating as many advantages for the offense. That's, again, not really anything against him. That's just kind of the reality of aging
Yeah.
as an NFL player.
I liked what you said about something that'll never go away with him as he's aged, because I'm almost throwing these last 2 seasons into what, when we look back on it, will probably be old man Kelce. Um, One of those sneaky skills is catch radius.
Mm.
He If a ball is in his vicinity, he can grab it. And I don't just mean like, going up and one-hand catches, although he has plenty of highlights in that his career. He has this ability, uh, to the way he can catch the ball over his shoulder extended is almost preternatural. Like, he has a sense for the ball, and that is something that, as long as he is playing football, that will never go away. His physical ability will diminish, it already has, but he is still a target to where, if you were throwing the ball to him, especially if you're a quarterback as intelligent as Mahomes, the combination of a smart Mahomes throw to the catch radius of Kelce is still going to be a lethal weapon in specific moments. It's no, we're not going to have another Kelce takeover game, or if we do, we're going to have maybe one, but that will always be there in specific situations.
Right. And that's kind of what I was going to say. Like, to add to that,
Mm.
people like, the reason why chemistry is so important when it comes to a quarterback and a wide receiver is because they like ball placement in certain areas depending on the route. And so Mahomes and Kelce clearly have figured out where Kelce wants the ball in certain situations and they've gotten such a rhythm related to it that it almost seems like no matter how you cover them, there's always going to be some sort of gap that Mahomes can hit. And so, yeah, like there are those types of, I guess you could say, secondary skill sets whenever you're looking at the talent of a pass catcher within the NFL that aren't really dependent upon athleticism to a certain extent. Obviously, there's a floor to that, but
Yeah.
basically that like they're not really going to go away until he retires. Like that's still going to be something that Mahomes and Andy Reid can use.
Yeah, it's like if you were this is a like a weird little tangent, but it's like if you had 3 tiers of ability, and so like your physical traits and athleticism is tier 1 in terms of like your literal measurables, and then the other side of the spectrum would be like your game intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Then right in the middle there would be those types of secondary skills where there is a level of athleticism that has to be a part of it, but it's also not something that is necessarily going to wildly differ between when you were 25 years old and 35 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of on the same page when it comes to what Travis Kelce's next season is going to look like. And it's a situation that's surrounded by a pretty amazing quarterback. But when we look at the state of the league, there's one quarterback room that jumps into my mind that I wanted to talk about. And we've had this discussion somewhat before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. I'll just pose the question. Is there a world in which this Browns quarterback room works out? Because they signed Kenny Pickett, then they signed Joe Flacco, then they draft Dylan Gabriel, and then they draft, in the same draft, Shedeur Sanders, and oh, by the way, Deshaun Watson is still on the roster.
So it kind of depends on what you mean by work out.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, it can't work out as long as Watson is still getting paid, if that makes sense. Like, as long as you are paying him that much money to do nothing, you can't really say that, like, as a whole, this experiment for the past 5 years, looking back on it.
So I actually,
out,
that's a really good take that, it's almost, you're asking a question that already has the answer. Like there's no way for it to work out because of the money they've already guaranteed to Deshaun Watson, which then begs the question, because I think I agree with that. Why do you draft 2 quarterbacks? That's the problem, is that you've put yourself in this situation where we know they're going to cut Watson, but it made complete sense. They signed Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. You've got someone who can start more likely and who will start more likely than not in Kenny Pickett, and a solid veteran, now at this point journeyman quarterback in Joe Flacco. Why draft not 1 quarterback, 2 quarterbacks?
Yeah, that's kind of where it's like, if by workout, like in my mind, just for like the sake of experiment conversation, like take what I said and put it to the back burner. Like, let's just forget about the whole Deshaun Watson of it all. Yeah. In terms of like actual field production, if you're saying workout, meaning like they find their franchise guy through this weird process, I do think that there's a non-zero chance basically related to the potential of Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, just because at this point, any rookie has a non-zero chance of becoming great. So
purely by the numbers game.
Exactly. Like there's no point of reference in terms of NFL football that we can point to say no. So therefore there's always that possibility. I do think, and I've even said this on the show, I feel like there are 2 very extreme views related to Shedeur Sanders, and he's probably going to end up right in the middle of those 2 fringe ideas. One being he's a clear consensus first round pick. Mel Kippner saying he's the best quarterback in the draft. The other being he's like a perennial backup, where it's like, I think that he can be a competent starter in the NFL at some point in his career. Is that what the Browns are looking for? In terms of Dillon Gabriel, again, there's a non-zero chance that he could be great. I don't really see it. But yeah, I think like it really is just going to depend upon their, like, what's their philosophy, because I think that, and we've also talked about this before, but like the whole concept of drafting a young quarterback while you already have a, presumed starter makes sense, right? Like, let's give him time to adapt to the NFL, and hopefully in 1 to 2 seasons, they'll be ready to start. And now they kind of have 2 bites at that apple with Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. This is one of those unique situations where I almost feel like they shouldn't wait and they need to just start one of them, because I just don't see that vision with this group of guys. And so because of that, they're just in a weird spot where I think you need Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel. Like, you need to pick one of them and you need to stick with them and really see what you got, and understand that we're not using team success to measure whether or not if they have the chops to be a starting NFL quarterback for a competent, good team.
Yeah.
But gain enough information to know what should we do in the future, because there's a real world, and we've talked about this, but there's a real world where next year they have the number 1 overall pick and they're in a position to draft a franchise quarterback, and you need the information to be based on what you have. And if they don't play those guys, they're not going to have that.
I think that, well, if you're gonna pick one, you have to pick Dillon Gabriel. You're not gonna start Shedeur Sanders, who was drafted lower, over Dillon Gabriel, because you essentially nip any confidence that Dillon Gabriel has in the bud. Another wrinkle to this conversation is the fact that even if we assume that they cut, which they are going to cut, Deshaun Watson, they're still going to have 4 quarterbacks on their roster. Like, you're saying that there's a non-zero chance that Shedeur Sanders could end up being the starter. There is a greater chance that Shedeur Sanders doesn't make the final 53-man roster. Like that, I mean, that's fully on the table in a way that I feel like not enough people are discussing, because, and I get it. It's because he's a big name. So, and it was a massive controversy around it. Like, Dillon Gabriel was drafted higher than him by a significant margin. If they're going to put their chips in on a rookie quarterback at some point in the season, it's going to be on Dillon Gabriel. What would the Vegas odds be on Shedeur Sanders starting a game this NFL season? Because if they've been inflated by the market, then I would take the under on that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I feel like they probably are.
Yeah. I mean, Vegas might have adjusted to the fact of money coming in. So I don't know. And I don't even know if that's an odd. I'm sure some odds maker has put out something like that. I don't know what it would be, but unless it's absolutely astronomical, I would say that he's not going to do that.
Yeah. I don't know. I believe a little bit more that there's a world where he could end up starting games.
You definitely believe more than I do.
Just because I think that, like, all the reports out of training camp is basically saying that Shedeur Sanders is everyone's favorite. And I guess, like, you're right. Like, Dillon Gabriel was drafted pretty significantly ahead of him, but we're still talking about like a 3rd round. Like, that's not, like, I don't think you owe your 3rd round quarterback pick minutes, if that makes sense.
No, but you owe him more than you do your 5th round pick, is all I'm saying.
Right, and I understand that in a vacuum, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, in terms of the context of the preseason, like, it seems like there is more, like, from the locker room perspective, from the coaching perspective, as well as from just like the actual play on the field, that Shedeur Sanders is outshining Dillon Gabriel a little bit. And so because of that, I could see a world where, the Browns decide like, okay, this guy clearly, even if, before he was on the team, we liked this guy over this guy, the 5th round pick still outperformed him. And so
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we want to win. We want to do the best we can. We're going to field the best guys out there. Like,
Now, for the vast majority of NFL organizations, I would agree with that philosophy. Like, they're going to be much smarter than we are because they literally have the data. Like, they see it right there. So, the goal is to play whoever you believe gives you the best chance at winning a game on Sunday. That's the stated goal of the quarterback that you choose to start. I don't know if the Browns would be one of those organizations that I would trust to make that type of decision, but generally, yes. I'm not saying that inherently a 3rd round pick is owed it, even if the 5th round pick is outperforming it. I'm just saying I don't necessarily trust the Browns to be great evaluators of talent.
I would say that's a fair assessment.
Well, on that note, why don't we turn to the meat and potatoes of
why don't we show the Browns what assessing a good player really looks like?
Yeah, take that, Cleveland.
If anyone
we're
from
gonna
the Browns organization is watching, take some notes.
But also, if you are watching, reach out to us. We will have you on the podcast.
Yeah, we will use your clout.
We're gonna talk about our top 5 breakout players or breakout player predictions heading into next season. I've accumulated a list of 5. Adam has a list of 5. Haven't heard each other's. If there's some overlap, then, we're awesome. But we're going to rank these, 1 through 5, or really 5 on down through 1 in terms of the likelihood of breakout and sort of the impact of the breakout if it would happen. But I'll let Adam go ahead and start us off with his 5th overall.
Yeah, before I get into that, though, I kind of want to talk about what my criteria were. Like, how did I determine if this player has this potential to be a breakout player in 2025? So I looked at 3 main criteria. I looked at potential. Basically, that's examining the skills, the talent, what they've shown on tape so far. Then I looked at opportunity because, I'm sure there are plenty of guys that just don't have the opportunity to show or to have a breakout year. And then finally, I looked at narrative because I think when we're having this discussion about whether or not a player is going to break out, there's inherently a discussion related to just how well known, how popular, how much aura he has, I guess, in terms of the NFL community at large. And so because of that, basically, like Jonathan said, from 5 to 1, I'm basically listing out both like the likelihood of the breakout happening and then also how much of a breakout that's going to be. So number 5, I have Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver for the 49ers. So let's just start off with potential, right? So looking at his games last year, he played in 11 games. He started 4 games. Obviously, the 49ers had multiple injuries and just kind of gave plenty of opportunity or a decent amount of opportunity for us to kind of see what Ricky Pearsall looks like within the NFL. So last year, like I said, he played 11 games. He had 31 receptions, 400 yards, 12.9 yards per reception, and 3 touchdowns. So I would say that is a respectable stat line given the amount of opportunities that he had. But he really showed, especially in the last 2 weeks, it's a small sample size, but he really showed what his potential could look like as a top guy for a team. So his best game was in week 17. He had 8 receptions for 141 yards and 1 touchdown. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, at least we can say that he has the potential to have those types of games because we've seen it before. And then in week 18, at that point, the season was kind of over. The 49ers kind of gave more opportunities to those younger guys, and he racked in six catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. So we kind of see that as his role expanded, he got better and better, and he had somewhat of breakout games, but not necessarily a breakout season. And I think that potential is what leads me to say that he can have a breakout year in 2025. So that's kind of the potential that he has. In terms of him just like as a talent, as a wide receiver, he's one of those guys where I'm just reminded of like, what are the things that you always say when you're talking about like white football players? Like
He's
he just plays the
scrappy.
game right. Like he just
He's feisty. He plays the game the right way.
like
He
yeah,
really
exactly.
his
Like Cooper
football
Kupp.
IQ is off the charts.
But that's kind of what you're
He
seeing
was also
with
shot.
Ricky. That's kind of what you're seeing with Ricky Pearsall, where he doesn't stand out at you athletically, but he's able to use his intelligence in ways to get open, specifically against zone. And that kind of leads into the opportunity, which is that he's going to be playing for a really gifted offensive mind that I think is going to be able to create a lot of opportunities for him. There's also the aspects that they lost Deebo Samuel, so he's going to be really stepping into that role. Brandon Ayuk is probably not going to be ready to play for the first week, so pretty much the 49ers 3 wide receivers that they're going to be fielding out, Juan Jennings, Demarcus Robinson, and then Ricky Pearsall. So he's going to have that opportunity. And again, like I really do think that having Coach Shanahan as the guy running those plays is going to be able to create a lot of opportunities. Jonathan talked about when we were grading the 49ers, how their run game seems to have a floor because even though Christian McCaffrey was out the whole year, they still were successful. And I think that establishing that run game is going to be really key to, I guess, pushing forward with the passing game with Brock Purdy. And so there's also enough guys on the roster in terms of wide receiver and pass catchers with George Kittle who can kind of distract the defense, and we'll kind of look up and we'll see like, oh my gosh, Ricky Pearsall is kind of ending up in certain situations and certain games to be like the number one option for Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is just the narrative. First off, he's a first round pick. Secondly, he plays for the 49ers, which is a larger market in California. There's this surprise factor related to the fact that he wasn't inherently supposed to be a first-year starter, but he kind of ended up being that at the end of the season. And then, of course, he got shot. Was kind of a big thing, where it's like just the whole storyline of him getting shot before the season and then ending up being able to play. It plays into that, right? Like that is kind of a big deal when we're talking about like, will this guy have national attention? Like that story is always going to be connected to his name. And so because of that, I believe that he has a massive opportunity to have a breakout year next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He was definitely near the top of my list. My number 5 player is going to be a name that maybe not a lot of people know, but they should and they hopefully will learn, which is Tuli Tuipulotu. For reference, I'm just going to refer to him as TT from now on. That way, for the ease of discussion, but you know who I'm talking about. Tuli Tuipulotu. In his previous season, 8.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. A very good season, in fact. He's an edge for the Los Angeles Chargers. But what we're looking at, and the reasons that I have to believe he's going to have a breakout season, is specifically the losses on the D-line. There's going to be a gap in talent that he's almost forced to fill. The Chargers lose Poona Ford, Joey Bosa, and Morgan Fox, all defensive line players. TG was already getting decent snaps because of the Joey Bosa injury-prone seasons over the last 2 years, but those snaps will only increase, and of course, there's a different mindset going into a season knowing that you're going to be a starting edge rusher compared to essentially being thrust into the role when you go into the season expecting to be in a backup position to someone like Joey Bosa. Uh, there's not really much else to say other than the idea that, one, I know the Chargers are going to have a great defensive scheme. They're going to prioritize the pass rush, obviously. Hard-nosed Harbaugh defense. And TT's not the fastest guy in the world. He's certainly not like your prototypical edge rushers of the modern NFL where it's all about speed and burst. He's definitely more so of a physical force, but he's someone who, when I look at his 2025-2026 NFL season, I see double-digit sacks. I see the first Pro Bowl of his career, and I see a name that, at the very minimum, people in the AFC West start to fear. You're not going to go into a Chargers game and be like, oh, we only have to face Tuli Tuipulotu in the rush. No, you're going to be concerned having your O-line and your tackles face up against a guy that's this physically gifted in terms of just his size and power. So yeah, my number 5 breakout player, Tuli Tuipulotu.
Yeah, I agree. And also, like, when I watch him, I kind of just like, he just seems like a hardball guy. Like, he seems like the
Yeah.
kind of guy that kind of just fits into that scheme. And so I think that he'll definitely have that opportunity with Joey Bosa leaving, just with that emphasis on the pass rush. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that he's going to be good. And I think that he's definitely going to be pushed into the spotlight more next year.
Yes.
Okay. So moving on to my next guy, number 4 is Theo Jackson, safety for the Vikings. So again, kind of following the same outline as I did before. Theo Jackson is an incredibly gifted safety. He's a versatile kind of like hybrid nickel safety. And he can pretty much do everything. He can cover receivers, he can blitz, he can help, he can play in the run game. It's these types of picks that allow Brian Flores's cover zero defense that has kind of really helped and elevated the Vikings. Looking at just how he performed last year, he only got 79 snaps. So this is looking at like a very small sample size in 2024. But he posted a 79.2 overall PFF grade. He earned a 77.1 coverage grade, and he's never been graded below a 69 in terms of coverage in his season. But in his career, he's only had 222 snaps. He's had 8 tackles, 2 assists, an interception. But this is the thing that stood out. His passer rating allowed was just a 49. And so he really has all of the potential, the skills, the assets to be able to be a really, really good safety within the NFL. But in terms of opportunity, so last year, the Vikings invested heavily in their offensive line, and naturally they had to let some guys go. One of those guys was Cameron Bynum, and they didn't really do anything to replace him, indicating that it's kind of a next guy up philosophy, and
Yep.
Theo Jackson is that guy. And in terms of Brian Flores and his defense, last year, the Vikings used 3 safeties that had over 1,000 snaps on defense. So safeties, being a safety in a Brian Flores defense is naturally going to garner a lot of opportunity. And like I said, like his ability to be able to play up without getting beat and still be involved within the run game, and that versatility is exactly the type of defender that Brian Flores is looking for. Because, and this is again one of the reasons to kind of get into the X's and O's a little bit, one of the reasons why the Vikings have been so good in terms of defense and why this scheme works is really entirely dependent upon the type of players that are Theo Jackson, where you're able to essentially sell out for the run in terms of stacking the box, right? Cover zero, meaning there is no one behind. But yet, even when you do that, you still have guys that are able to make up for it, right?
Yeah.
Before it was Cameron Bynum and Harrison Smith, and now it's going to be Harrison Smith and Theo Jackson. And so for him to be able to play into that superpower that is the cover zero defense and the Vikings scheme is going to be really, really impactful, because normally it's kind of like one of those situations where if you play Madden and they blitz every time, it's like, okay, I'm just going to put my running back in like an out route, and I'm just going to throw it to the flat every single time until they
Yeah.
stop. Well, the problem is if you have DBs that are quick enough to be able to cover that, even when they're at a disadvantage positionally, or even be able to cover guys deep with that disadvantage, then there's not really much that the offense can do, and they're kind of in a bind. And so I think he just fits in with that really, really well. Then in terms of the narrative, I think that the Vikings are, with them losing Sam Darnold and now JJ McCarthy stepping in, I think that we're kind of in another situation where obviously last year they were underrated in terms of how successful they'd be coming into the 2024 season. I kind of feel like we're back to that to a certain extent because they did lose Sam Darnold. And so I think the rise of the Vikings is really going to be dependent upon their defense in terms of national attention. And Theo
Hmm.
Jackson is going to be one of those guys where you kind of look up and you're like, oh my gosh, like look how impactful this guy is. Look at all the incredible schemes that they're able to throw out there. And it's because Theo Jackson is on the field, kind of holding it down. And
This
then
is the
also
type of guy that on a Monday Night Football, for whatever reason, Troy Aikman picks him to obsess over for the entire game.
yeah,
That's what, and that's a
exactly.
compliment. That's the type of player that Theo Jackson can be next season.
Yeah, exactly. Like I could see a world where, he's a Pro Bowl pick. He's just one of those guys that like you look up and you're like, there are going to be some people who are like, is this the best safety in the league? Where it's like, I don't know if he's going to go that far, but I do think that he's going to really be pushed into national attention in terms of the safety position.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. The Vikings defense and that entire scheme is really fun to watch and was one of the more fun
It is.
things to watch in the NFL last season. My number 4 breakout player for the 2025 NFL season is Xavier Legette, everybody's
Mm.
favorite good old country boy. If you haven't seen a clip of Xavier Legette talking, you should.
It's
It's
so awesome.
incredible. His previous season, uh, just under 500 receiving yards to go along with 4 touchdowns and a pretty mediocre 10 yards per catch. There are multiple reasons to believe here. Well, there's kind of one and a half reasons. The first is, and the most legitimate one, is the wide receiver room. Adam Thielen is officially in sort of the security blanket era of his career, meaning that he's always going to be there as an option for Bryce Young if he needs to, but those targets and those receptions are only going to go down over time, which means someone needs to fill them. Now, I know the immediate thought is, what about Tet McMillan, their first round draft pick, who they took, I believe, at either the number 8 or the number 9 overall pick? Can't remember off the top of my head. We're sitting still in a position where Xavier Legette is ironically going to be behind Adam Thielen, the most experienced with Bryce Young in terms of a really, actual pass catching threat on this offense. And that kind of gets into the second reason to believe, which is a level of belief in Bryce Young. And I don't mean this
Mhm.
in terms of compared to the rest of the league. I just mean relative to Bryce Young. I expect more continuity between the last 6 weeks of the previous season compared to the first handful and really the entirety of his rookie season in the NFL, which was obviously before Xavier Legette arrived. I think that I have enough confidence in Bryce Young to say that alongside Xavier Legette's improvement, because we know the ability is there, and Bryce Young continuing to get more and more comfortable, it there's a possibility in which, just purely in terms of stat lines, it could double for Xavier Legette. We're probably talking around somewhere between, around 900 receiving yards and closer to 10 touchdowns than 4 touchdowns. And really, the best part about this is that if this breakout season happens where more and more people get to know Xavier Legette alongside a potential Bryce Young saving his career and showing that he's closer to the quarterback of the end of last season than the beginning of last season, we're just going to be graced with more and more Xavier Legette interviews and clips, which is great for America. So I believe this is the breakout player that, except for save one other, this is the one that I hope happens the most because boy, do I love Xavier Legette. And he's just such a skilled player alongside his personality. Why would you not want him to have a breakout year?
Exactly. No, yeah, his accent is incredible. It's so awesome hearing him talk.
I think there's a clip of him out there talking about like eating raccoon, and it's the most awesome thing ever. It's incredible.
It's so funny whenever you watch guys play and then you hear their voice and you're like, that's not what I expected. Not a football player, but like Karl Anthony Towns comes to mind.
Well, people forget now because he became so big and now he's like on the all-time Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks. There was a period during not his rookie season, but his first year starting. Remember Mahomes? Everyone had to get used to his voice. It's still,
you know,
but it's a joke
like,
now.
Kermit the Frog-ish. That's the joke.
It's kind of a joke now. But I remember like you would have people in Kansas City at the time or casual fans who know about Mahomes during that first MVP season. And then they hear a clip of him at the podium for the first time. And you're like, whoa, that's our franchise quarterback.
That's the face of the league. Exactly. Oh my gosh. That's
I'm only saying that Xavier Legette could be the face of the league.
That's what a breakout year looks like for him. No, moving on. My number 3 overall breakout candidate for next year, Brenton Strange, tight end for the Jaguars. So this one is kind of, for Jaguars fans, probably seems, like this is on the top of their mind. But for I think the rest of the world is kind of a deep cut. But talking about Brenton Strange, he's really, really strong. He's really, really athletic. He's a incredible pass catcher as well as a great run blocker. And so just that combination makes him incredibly valuable for any offense within the league. Looking at his athleticism, he ran a 4.7 40-yard dash. He's in the 82nd percentile in terms of broad jump and the 91st percentile in terms of vertical jump. He is one of the most dynamic young tight ends that the league has to offer. And he's really, really great at making guys miss, which is obviously when you're running with the football, a really cool trait to have. So just kind of looking at that, he hasn't had the most opportunity within the Jaguars offense, especially because of Evan Ingram's role. But talking about opportunity, he's now gone. He's now signed with the Broncos. And so Brenton Strange is kind of the next man up within this offense and is set to be the number 1 starting tight end for the Jaguars. But the other thing to consider within this whole conversation is the new offensive genius that is running the Jaguars offense, that being
every episode you were
Liam
more
Cohen.
and more into Liam Cohen. Every single episode.
Listen, Liam Cohen is awesome. He's going to be incredible. I am
Duval.
planting my flag. Duval. I am planting my flag in Liam Cohen. I feel like that's a weird way of putting that, but whatever.
You're buying property on Liam Cohen Island.
I am. I'm buying stock in Liam Cohen. But basically, Liam Cohen's offense, and I've talked about this before, is incredibly dynamic and adapts to the players that he has on the field. But just kind of looking at last year, Cade Otton, the tight end for the Buccaneers, had 84 targets, which is 9th among tight ends. And even though it is 9th, I feel like relative to his skill level in terms of tight ends within the NFL, that is a high rate in terms of receptions and targets.
Yeah.
And so basically what I'm saying is that tight ends are heavily involved within Liam Cohen's offense, but not just from like the pass catching perspective, but also from the run blocking perspective.
And I feel like, to
Liam,
butt in here, the Buccaneers fans would, if obviously having watched last season, would agree with that, and they would say that it was almost utilized too much relative to the skill
exactly.
level of Cade Otton. But with a
Yeah.
guy like Brenton, you're dealing with a whole nother just physical skill level.
Yes, it's true. And so I think that he's going to be used heavily within the run blocking scheme. He's going to be a motion piece. He's going to be one of those guys that you can bring in to just create advantages for your offense and for the run game. And so I think that he's going to be really, really impactful within the run game, and that's going to kind of add to this, I guess, like, breakout season that I think he's about to put on in 2025, where I don't think we're not just, it's kind of reminds me of like George Kittle, how George Kittle is like, yes, obviously he gets the touchdowns, he gets the receptions, he makes guys miss, he makes those big plays. But also part of the reason why George Kittle is the name George Kittle is also because of those incredible blocking highlights where he just puts people on their butts. And
Yeah.
so I think like that's kind of what we're seeing with Brenton Strange. And then in terms of narrative, I think just it's kind of weird because I think that if you're on a really, really good team, the narrative is kind of in your favor in terms of a breakout player. But if you're on a really, really bad team, the narrative is also within your favor
Yeah, there's a
because
bit
it's
of a
like, yeah, the
horseshoe.
Jaguars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Jaguars kind of suck, but at least like, did you see Brenton Strange put that guy on his butt? Like, there's going to be that level of like, like there's this, I guess just like attention on him because he's so
And
bad.
also, and a thing about this too, to add to it, is with being on the Jaguars, I hope you're right, because it would make Jaguars London games more enjoyable. Like, he's gonna have the
Yeah,
opportunity to be
true. I didn't even think about that.
in a time slot of his own. Like, that's the only football game happening in London, and Brenton Strange goes off for 120 yards and a couple touchdowns, and puts a guy on his butt. Like, that's what I hope happens, because
Yeah,
we need that type of energy for the London games.
we do. We do, for the sake of international football.
Brenton Strange, the international football is on your shoulders.
The future of the NFL is dependent upon you. But that's pretty much all I have to say. He's a really, really good player, and he's finally going to get his chance. And I think that just the stars are aligning with the fact that now Liam Cohen is going to be leading this offense.
I do like to imagine a world in which Brenton Strange somehow is listening to this, and he's just like, oh, I gotta put international football on my back.
Yeah, we just totally ruined him. He's like, no,
He's
just crumbles under the
psychologically
pressure.
destroyed.
He'll never recover from this.
Oh, please, Brenton
That's so
Strange, we
funny.
need you. For my number 3 breakout player, and this one to many people will seem obvious, and it may be the first thing that comes to mind when this topic is brought up. Drake Maye, the Patriots quarterback, heading into his sophomore season. Last year, he just got over 2,200 passing yards, 15 touchdowns to go along with 10 interceptions. The problem is that for Patriots fans, and maybe for his career, the stat lines didn't really matter last year. And I do have a little bit of a hard time parsing between how much of that is blind hope from Patriots media voices, but there is clearly a reason to believe, number one, where there is smoke, there is fire. The noise around what he can be has to count for something. When you pair that with a complete overhaul of the coaching staff and the offensive line and a weak schedule, I'm not going to throw out a prediction of what the stat line could look like for him next season, because that feels so unruly. I do want to say quickly, though, on the Drake May thing, and this almost seems weird because it's in a video where I'm saying he could have a breakout season, but it's the reason why I have him number 3 on this list and not number 1. The weapons are still scarce, and this is a
Mm.
brand new offensive coordinator and scheme to operate under. And so there's this assumption that almost because the roster in general improved and the coaching staff pretty obviously improved, you're going to instantly now be talking about Drake Mole being a shoe-in Pro Bowl quarterback, and he's going to be competing to win the AFC East. Let's pump the brakes there a little bit. When I say he's going to have a breakout season, really what I mean, just as in general, is that Patriots fans are no longer going to want to take a long walk off a short pier. That's where we're at right now. Like, breakout season for a Patriots quarterback post Tom Brady is that New England no longer wants to end it all. That's where we're at, which is that would be a legitimate breakout season because there's
Yeah.
that little sparkle of hope and shimmer from last year can actually translate into one, both wins. I'm not even necessarily saying making the playoffs, but better than 3-14 or 4-13 or whatever. I don't count that last week of this season, which they shouldn't have
Yeah.
actually won. Whatever. Can you actually translate that into being a close to 500 team, maybe a little bit below, maybe a little bit above, and actually show that when you're dealing, especially with a competent O-line, even if the weapons aren't
Mm.
there, we're like, oh, this is the franchise guy. We can say solidly for a fact at the end of next season, when it's all said and done, Drake May will be getting a second contract with the New England Patriots. I consider that relative to the quarterback position to be a breakout season for a guy in Drake May's position. And yes, to be clear, I do have belief in him. I just want to throw a little bit of caution into that whole conversation. But that being
Yeah.
said, Drake May is an excellent player, and I do believe that he is worthy for the most part of the hype.
Yeah, and I think that if you're talking about the hype related to the Patriots, baked into that conversation is a breakout year for Drake May, where you're
Yeah.
saying like
Yeah.
this is a quarterback that is good enough where they are again 500 or above. Where it's like this is a quarterback that is competent enough within his second season, his first full season, like being able to take a team to the next level, if that makes sense, like
Yeah.
to another tier, to another forward within their progression, within their rebuild that they're currently on. And so, yeah, no, I feel like, again, if you are someone who believes that the Patriots are going to take that next step next year, I am one of them, and I think you are too, then baked into that is an inherent breakout season for May.
Yeah, and to put a button on it, when we talk about breakout season and the expectations, when they drafted Drake May, what I always said is in a situation like that, you're on a 3-year timetable. That's where the organization is at. Your first season is basically just trying to see the little flashes. I mean, if he did anything better than what he did last season, it would just be a cherry on top. The second season is where you are the starter full time for the majority of the season, unless you get in a situation where, towards the end of the season, he's played well, but the record isn't great, sit him, don't want to risk injury. And then your third year is where you want to put it all together and make a playoff run and go from there. Now, the hype has been so great around Drake May that we have expectations for the second season, a lot of which is helped by how easy their schedule is maybe they could slip into the playoffs. That's not my criteria for saying that Drake May
Mhm.
has a breakout season, but almost by definition, if the Patriots make the playoffs, it would mean he
Yeah,
had a breakout season.
exactly. Okay. Very cool. Let's talk about let's give the offensive line some love. Let's talk
Yes.
about
Yes.
Christian Mahogany, guard for the Lions. So obviously last year, if you're tracking, this offseason or the Lions offseason as a whole, there are a lot of question marks related to their offensive line. They lost Zeitler, um, Frank Ragnow, who potentially, top 2 to 3 best center within the league, right? If Creed Humphrey is one, he's probably two. He retires. And so now there's kind of a little bit of question marks related to this interior line. And so the solution seems to be Christian Mahogany. So last year, he played a little bit, basically just because of injuries at the end of the season. But in those 5 appearances within the season last year, he had a PFF grade overall of 91.5.
Wow.
He had an 82.5 pass blocking grade and a 92.2 overall grade at right guard within the playoffs specifically, which is important because basically what happened was it wasn't till the end of the season that he really got minutes, that he really got burn. And that's when he played the best. He showed a high ability to play both guard positions on the left and the right side. And even with minimal experience, he showed incredible ability to both run block and pass block. So in terms of potential, like he has it all there. And I'm one of those guys that truly believes that like very few offensive linemen are going to be good their first year, that this is one of those just positions where it just takes a few years for guys to really, really figure it out. This is kind of seeming like he's one of those guys that kind of just gets it right off the bat. In terms of opportunity, like I said, they lost 2 of those big pieces within the interior line in Kevin Zeitler and then Frank Ragnow. And so basically right now the idea is that Graham Glasgow, who I believe played left guard for the most of the year last year, is going to step in and play center. And then they have some other guys, Tate Ratledge, I believe, is going to play probably left guard. And then Christian Mahogany is going to step up and be the right guard. And so that's the biggest opportunity you could ask for, right? He's going to be a starter on the Lions offensive line, more likely than not. And then in terms of narrative, I think one of the biggest things that we talk about when we talk about the Lions is just the impact of that offensive line. Yeah. It seems like even when they sucked, their offensive line was still great. Like they always have that consistent unit within the league. And now that that's a question mark, we're really gonna look at Christian Mahogany and whether or not he can step up. And the truth is, when you look at how that offense works, they can't have a weakness within the offensive line or it's gonna all come crumbling down. And that's why there's that narrative push and why I think we could look at him as a huge break. That's why he's so high on the list, is because we're talking about a guy where, like, maybe I'm over exaggerating a little bit, but I truly believe that the success of the Lions next year is going to be pretty heavily dependent upon Christian Mahogany's development. Like, he doesn't play a sexy position. He doesn't play wide receiver or quarterback. He isn't getting touchdowns, but that scheme, like, you need a good offensive line. And especially a good interior offensive line for that run game to work. One guy messes up within that, and they're screwed. And we're looking up, and we're like, the Lions aren't even winning the NFC North. And so, because of that, that is where the narrative push comes in. Where it's like, can they continue to have the best offensive line within the league? Or, top 5 offensive line within the league every year? Like, if Christian or Mahogany steps up, we're looking at a situation where it's like he's the next great Lions guard. Like he is this new iteration of this incredible Lions offensive line. If he doesn't work out, we're looking up and saying, what do they do next? We're going to have question marks related to Dan Campbell and whether or not the coordinators were carrying. We're going to have question marks related to Jared Goff and whether or not he really can take another team to the Super Bowl. So like, it's just crazy how even if like it's not entirely fair, all of these really big implications are kind of dependent upon the development and the play of Christian Mahogany in his second year in the NFL.
I'm not even joking. I legitimately, in the middle of that, got chills when you were talking about that. I love it when you talk O-line. You're you're so good at selling me and really uh, to other people how important the trenches are. And man,
They're the
just
most
listening to you
important.
talk about that is the most hyped I've been for NFL football this entire offseason. I'm not even joking. I wanted to
Listen,
watch
people
NFL football right now.
Dude, listen, people do not understand. And as a Bengals fan, I can tell you, it pisses me the frick off, dude. I'm so pissed off when I watch Bengals football sometimes, and just the lack of just like it just seems like they don't care. Like this is the most important position group on the offense, without a doubt. Like it is your floor setter. And like there are very few examples of teams having any sort of success without a certain level of play from their
Yeah.
offensive line. It's literally the reason why the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl last year. Like
Yes.
they did not three-peat because of one offensive lineman. Everyone else was solid. One guy. Like it's the most important thing. You can't have a weak link on that offensive line. And so we'll see. Because, and you know, I talk about Christian Mahogany, but like there are also other guys. Like we're gonna have to see how well we're gonna have to see how well Graham Glasgow transitions to center. We're gonna have to see who that other guy is gonna be able to, if he's gonna be able to step up at guard. Like what I think will happen if the Lions aren't as good or take steps back next year is their interior offensive line is not going to get it together. It's going to be one of those guys. The conversation is going to be pointed to Dan Campbell. The conversation is going to be pointed to Jared Goff, when in reality, it's like, no, they just do not have that same dominance that they had before.
It's a really great point. I'm with you. Yeah. Well, my second overall breakout player is the safety from Kansas City, Jaden Hicks, heading into his sophomore season. His previous year, 469 snaps with a pretty great for a rookie safety 75 PFF coverage grade, a minuscule 2.7% missed tackle rate, and 3 interceptions to boot. The reasons to believe are a multitude. One, the raw talent. The guy is a heat-seeking missile. When he locks onto you, he hits you, and he hits you hard, and you are going to the ground. Go right now and watch highlights of Jaden Hicks making tackles. It's legitimately impressive that a safety at his size can hit as hard as he does. Another reason to believe in the success is the gap in talent. Justin Reed is gone for Kansas City. Hicks is the presumed next in line, and even if it takes a few weeks at the very start of the season to lock down that he is now that starting safety in Justin Reed's previous role, he is going to get to that point. And then the third and perhaps the most important reason to believe is that you're dealing with Steve Spagnuolo. This is a Steve Spagnuolo who does nothing but just develop secondary players. He takes pride and does his best work in taking the raw talent of someone in the secondary and honing them into his vision. Steve Spagnuolo wants to create Jaden Hicks in his own image. And so and when you look at a guy, again, like I said, pairing it with the physical talent that is there, and again, a running joke that we have on this show that you're going to have to take my word for it because it was before we had this podcast. When he fell to the 4th round last season, I was legitimately shocked. I had my eye on him going into last year's draft, and when he fell to the Chiefs where he did in the 4th round, I was overjoyed. I mean, you knew right away, especially for a safety, he's not going to start in his rookie season. But now he's shown enough flashes. We have the tape and the advanced metrics to show that he is capable of filling a starting safety spot in his sophomore season. And the projection is a lockdown safety who averages at least one, play a game for the current dynasty of the NFL, even though they're coming off of a Super Bowl loss. So all of that noise around Kansas City in general, plus even if this was removed from Kansas City in a vacuum, I believe Jaden Hicks is skilled enough to do this. That's why he makes it all the way to the number 2 spot of my breakout season. This is someone who, the color commentator on a random, Sunday afternoon game is just going to have a lot of fun talking about Jaden Hicks for the entire game every time he makes a play, because he will be all over the field. And that's where Jaden Hicks is going to be.
When you're talking about narratives and breakout players, I think one of the most important things to talk about is the ability of a player to look good on an edit. And that is where Jaden Hicks shines.
Yes.
Like, even if, because there is a certain aspect where it's like the general hate that the Chiefs get, like, he's going to be bulletproof to that. Like, I really do think that to be the case, because he's going to just like destroy people. Is like, he's just going to be so fun. Like, he's going to be like, the hype music in the background, just like the crazy edits of him just putting people on their butts. Yeah. Like, and this isn't necessarily like a comp, but like an Ed Reed type, or where it's just like, or like a Cam Chancellor type.
I'm ready to. I'm ready to make that comp. I'm ready to make the Ed Reed comp.
Okay, let's everybody calm down a bit before we compare him to one of the greatest safeties of all time. But
I'm there.
I mean, like, he's gonna get a nickname like Bam Bam Cam Chancellor or Weapon X. With Deion Dog, you know what I mean? Like, he has that ability to hit people that hard where like people are just gonna fall in love with him.
Yeah.
And so, like, the more opportunities he has to put someone on their butt in the open field, the more and more and more. Like, he could suck. Like, he could legitimately not be good at coverage. And if he has a lot of big hits, people are going to be like, this is the greatest safety in the league.
And that's the thing too, is I kind of overglossed that, and because it was a very good coverage grade for a rookie safety. The highlight of that is for a safety to have a 2.7% missed tackle rate is incredible.
That is crazy.
That's what that's why I call him a heat-seeking missile, is because when you hear that, you think of the missile part. He's going to hit hard. The heat-seeking part of that is when he locks onto you, you are not getting by him.
Which is so important too, because I wouldn't say that he uses his secondary pieces within the blitz often, but he does it in really opportune moments, especially against Lamar Jackson. That's something that we've talked about.
And
before.
Jaden Hicks also, he has the ability to where when Spagnuolo wants to feign a blitz, Hicks has the ability to do the feign blitz and then jut back out into coverage and it just deceive
kind of
the quarterback
a little bit. Yeah. Well, and so what's great about that too, and like, because Reed was okay. Justin Reed was like, he was okay. But if there's one thing you have to give him credit for, it was his ability to make open field tackles. Like, he was an incredible tackler. And so in terms of just like, are we going to miss a beat with this replacement on the Chiefs defense? Like, I don't think so. No. Because I think that like all you have to do is be able to tackle really well in the open field. Obviously, Hicks has that ability. And so it's everything past that really, it's like, this guy might be a standout player on a defense that's playing in the Super Bowl every other year.
Yeah, it's basically the production that you're going to get is not going to decrease, and you're going to get that added oomph that, love Justin Reed, did a lot for the Kansas City Chiefs. Unfortunately, Justin Reed's greatest highlight in a Kansas City Chiefs game is when he was on the Texans with the failed fake punt in that divisional game during Mahomes' first Super Bowl run, which there is an irony to that being your most famous play. And yet Jaden Hicks is going to be someone who not just in Kansas City, but like you said, that's going to be his superpower, is the ability for Chiefs haters to secretly enjoy watching Jaden Hicks.
Exactly. Okay. I'm going to move on to my number one breakout candidate
Whoa!
for 2025. I know. And this is one of those things where it's like, I didn't even write that many notes because I feel like it's kind of a no-brainer. Just because like,
Okay.
and like, it's not even, because like, I feel like the other guys, like I'm making like deep cuts, like diving deep into these rosters to try to figure out who are the guys that are going to make it. This is like, spoiler alert, it's Keon Coleman, wide receiver for the Bills. This is one of those like very obvious, like, okay, this guy is in the perfect position to have a breakout year next year. So just looking at his stats last year, it was a bit of a disappointment. And one thing you'll notice with this also is like, we're not going to, obviously you can't have a breakout year in 2025 if you're already good. And so last year, I would say was overall a bit of a disappointment relative to his draft position and grade. 19.2 yards per reception is what stands out there. But when looking at the other stats, he had 556 yards, 4 touchdowns, 29 receptions on 56 targets, which is a catch rate just above 51%. Not the best. And so looking at that, there's not a lot to go off of. But this is where opportunity and narrative really carries it for me. Last year, we're talking about a Bills team that lost their number one weapon going into the season with Stephon Diggs. And that was because of that lack of weaponry. That's where we saw that kind of, I guess, disbelief in the Bills and kind of saying like, this is kind of, they're going to be their downfall this season. Turns out that wasn't the case. They still were incredible and made it to the AFC Championship. But I think that Keon Coleman next year is going to be the wide receiver one for the Bills. Obviously, when you're talking about wide receivers and their ability to have a breakout year, a lot of that is just dependent upon the quarterback. There are plenty of wide receivers on crappy teams, Adonai Mitchell, for example, that are just not going to be able to have that opportunity, even if they have the incredible skill set. And so Keon Coleman has a great skill set. He played like a rookie wide receiver in his first year, but all the reports are saying that he's looking better. He looks more in shape. He's more ready to go. And he's going to have, probably of any potential breakout player within the NFL, I think he has the most opportunity in 2025 because you're playing on an incredible team who, like just looking from a scheduling perspective, has a really, really good chance, definitely the best odds to win the AFC if we're talking about like Vegas odds.
Yeah.
And a quarterback who didn't have a wide receiver one last year, and he's just ready. Like he's given on a platter this perfect opportunity to be able to have a breakout season. And so that's why he's number one on my list, where it's like there is no one who has a better opportunity than Keon Coleman. And the question is whether or not he's just going to take it. And I think that he will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not breaking any news here or saying anything out of the box. I will say I did come up with this comp before I saw it in other places, but the comp for Keon Coleman, and I'll actually confess something really quickly. I was in the very small minority of Chiefs fans that when we traded the pick away from Keon Coleman to take Xavier Worthy, I was really bummed. I'm really high.
Yeah, you've said that on the show.
I think I have.
You said that we've talked about that before.
I'm really high on Keon Coleman. His comp to me is Mike Evans. His size and his ability is something to where if he puts it together, like you said, everything else for him is on a silver platter. So yeah, the only reason he didn't make it on my list is maybe more so just bitterness that I think he could have a breakout season for a team that, my team is rivals with, or is it a rivalry if we've beaten you 4 times in the playoffs in 5 years? Get my little dig in. But anyways, yes, Keon Coleman is absolutely worthy of being your number one pick.
Yeah.
I will go ahead and pair this with another wide receiver who still very much meets my criteria. His last season was borderline close to being good enough to where I could say it wouldn't be a breakout year, but it's because of how much more I believe there is in the tank. And that is Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver for the
Mhm.
Arizona Cardinals. In his previous season, he had 116 targets, which is crazy for a rookie wide receiver, but only for 62 receptions, which is a 53% catch rate, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns. The reasons to believe are simple. One, we know the talent. I don't even need to get into it. If you are an
Yeah.
NFL fan, even casually, you have seen clips and highlights of Marvin Harrison Jr. You know what his ability is. When I talk about more of a breakout, I'm looking at two areas. One, the team as a whole and the vision and goals of the team. The division for the Arizona Cardinals, the NFC West, compared to the previous years of 49er dominance with flashes of the Rams, is now winnable. That's a winnable division, and the Cardinals are maneuvering as a team like it is winnable. There's reason to
Mhm.
believe that there is going to be a competitive spirit and fire under this team. And then the second part of that is that Kyler Murray is in the most pivotal year of his career. This is likely the year that he is playing to maintain his life in Arizona. When you look at over the cap, the Cardinals actually can trade Murray pre-June 1st of 2026 and save $35 million against the cap while eating just under $18 million. If you're not a cap person or a cap nerd, basically all that is to say is that Kyler Murray is actually decently tradable next season, and there would be a market for Kyler Murray, meaning that Kyler Murray individually is playing with a fire underneath him as well, about as much as you can without it being a quote unquote contract year. I say all of these things because I'm not concerned about the Marvin Harrison Jr. piece. It's everything else around him.
Yeah.
When we look at those pieces around him and what I believe Arizona has the ability to be, at the bare minimum offensively, there's no reason that Marvin Harrison Jr. cannot go for 1,500 yards, 12 plus touchdowns, and improve his catch rate up to like 60%. I mean, we're talking about someone who at the end of next season will be in top 5 NFL wide receiver discussions if it breaks the way that I think it will, which means that by my criteria, if we don't consider last season to have been enough of a success for him, he's my clear number one breakout player. Everyone in a world that I am predicting will be talking about Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there is kind of this, like when you're talking about a talent level to this extent, in my mind, there and like the situation, there's kind of this set point that needs to happen with all of the factors unrelated to Marvin Harrison Jr. in order for him to reach that ceiling, which is quarterback play and offense as a whole, right? Offensive scheme. And so the question is, can the Cardinals and Kyler Murray reach that set point that allows Marvin, that is almost the jumping off point for Marvin Harrison Jr.,
Mhm.
where it's like, because like I'm sure there are plenty of guys throughout NFL history who had the talent, but their team and their situation never reached that point where they were able to be fully maximized. And so that's really the question related to next season and Marvin Harrison Jr. is that can they reach that bright line where their offense is good enough and Kyler Murray is able to get him the ball enough in, advantageous situations for him where he's able to then take it from there and reach levels that, we can't really foresee.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about, like you said, we're talking about a guy that has the potential to be a top 5, I even believe top 3 wide receiver within the NFL.
Yeah.
And so that makes perfect sense for a number 1 breakout candidate.
The
right? Like when
unfortunate
you have a ceiling like that.
Yeah. The unfortunate flip side of that is because of everything I said, and it's almost a hard position to say that he's in his sophomore season. It has to be this year, because if it
Yeah.
isn't, then Kyler Murray is most likely gone, and then you're in a quarterback rebuild situation.
You're starting again.
Which means
You're
that
starting again.
which means that if it doesn't happen this year, not that Marvin Harrison Jr. could be bad, but the Kyler Murray and the offense isn't good enough around him to keep their place in the Cardinals organization, then all of a sudden we're talking about a world where Marvin Harrison is reaching the end of his rookie contract, and he, hasn't broken out fully, which weirdly enough could actually long-term be beneficial, because in an alternate world where Arizona then decides that they can't, or they don't want to pay him when they're in a rebuilding position, and then someone else snags him up.
He just requests a trade.
Yeah. So, but point being, if it doesn't happen this season, then the next few years of Marvin Harrison Jr.'s career could be quote unquote a disappointment.
Well, yeah, because basically, like, best case scenario you would hope for is that within that time frame, they would basically, by the end of his rookie contract, be at where they are now.
Yeah.
Within that rebuild. Yep. So it's like, that's not. Like, you're totally right. Well, I think that's it. Those are our top 5 breakout candidates.
At some point during the middle of next season, we will have to come back and reassess.
That's a great idea. Just kind of see, like, were we completely wrong?
Mine will all be right, and Adam's will all be wrong.
Yeah, right. I'm excited. You ever just, like, say something and you're just excited to see if you're right? I'm really excited to see if I'm right, specifically about Christian Mahogany. Like, I truly do believe in him. And there was a bunch of offensive lines that kind of were in, or offensive linemen that were in my honorable mention list. One, Amarius Mims for the Bengals. Another is he didn't have a breakout season last year, but Cooper Beebe, center for the Cowboys. There was actually a couple guys for the Cowboys that I kind of wanted to, like, the Tyler Guyton, Tyler Booker. There's another Tyler who starts. They have 3 starting offensive linemen whose first name is Tyler, but I can't remember the last one's name. But yeah, there were a couple guys, but I just felt like Christian Mahogany really has the most pressure, because, like, if it doesn't work out, there's going to be a lot of crazy conversations about the Lions.
Yeah.
Some other honorable mentions that I had, obviously Chase Brown, the greatest running back in football. And then, there were some other guys that kind of made my list. But yeah, no, this was really fun.
Basically, every Chiefs offensive lineman outside of Creed Humphrey. That's in my.
Well,
that's what I'm projecting.
To have a breakout year.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to say that what's his name? Juwan Taylor. He might. I don't think he's got that juice in him. I don't like Juwan Taylor.
We've had this discussion. I'm
just like, I just don't. I think that he's taken it too far, because it's not like what he's doing is necessarily new with the whole. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like lining up like 2 yards in the backfield and
to be clear,
like clearly taking a
lot
step.
Of other players are pushing it alongside him. It's just that he's in prime time the most.
Not to that extent. No, it is not to that extent.
He pushes it quite a lot.
He's doing it so much more.
It's the equivalent of me being in this position in the camera right now and then being like, "What? This is fine. This is a totally legal position."
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not even one of those things. But the problem is that he understands you can't call it every time.
There is a beauty to that.
Still.
There is a beauty.
There's a certain aspect. Like, you'll see he'll like eat the penalty, but then he's like, yeah, but I'm still going against, insert pass rusher here. So I'm still going to give myself this advantage.
It's
like, I'll take the the penalty but I'll just do it next time, and you're not going to call it again.
I'm going to make the craziest sports analogy of all time, which is to say that Jawan Taylor is like the Bad Boys Pistons.
Explain.
They can't call it every time. I can just smack someone. They can't call it every single time we do it.
Oh my gosh.
That's what he does.
Okay, yeah, you actually did tie it together. I was like, where is he going with this? But no, you did it. That actually does make sense. There you go. Okay.
He's the Bill Lambier of the NFL.
Oh my gosh. Alrighty. Let's move on to some clip farming. Let's get some views, shall we? We're trying to build this thing. So first off, we just got two fun little segments for you. So I'm going to name an NFL player, and I want you to tell me, no, that's not right. I'm going to name two NFL players, and I want you to tell me which is better, new or old. So specifically, these are going to be two quarterbacks from two different eras. And the inspiration from this came from the fact that recently, which I guess we could have talked about this with Hot Gossip, Aaron Rodgers said that next year could potentially, in a world, be his last season within the NFL. And I feel like Aaron Rodgers is kind of the last quarterback in that era that where I fell in love with NFL football.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Tom Brady's, Peyton Manning's, Eli Manning's of the world, Drew Brees. Like all those guys, he's kind of the last one standing.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what inspired this little segment. So again, I'm going to name two players. One is old, one is new. They're quarterbacks, and we're going to have a discussion about which is better. So the first two, Phillip Rivers and Justin Herbert. This is an interesting conversation.
In terms of talent, or if they like what they've accomplished. In terms of
whatever you want.
In terms of accomplishment, if Justin Herbert retired right now, Phillip Rivers is the better all-time quarterback.
Well, yeah, that's
and
true.
I don't just mean that.
But I guess projecting.
Fair.
I feel like in terms of that, you have to project a little bit.
But the problem is what are we projecting from with Herbert? Because if you multiply 0 times 100, it's still 0.
Dude, you hate this man.
I'm sorry. I know the physical talent is there. From? I know the physical talent here. This is a good jumping off point for my Herbert rant. The physical talent is there. The problem is that the NFL is a sport which perhaps more than any other, because of the small sample size, winning matters the most. Because of that, when Justin Herbert has not won a single playoff game, and has in fact in one of his 2 playoff losses, because he's only been to the playoffs twice, blown one of the worst playoff blown leads of all time, and then in his most recent playoff game he has more turnovers than he did for the entirety of the season, then at a certain point I can no longer be going off of your rookie season arm talent, and I have to say, when does it translate to winning? And I understand there's situational stuff with coaching. I think that when we look back on this Justin Herbert era, what's the peak gonna be? An AFC Championship appearance? I don't know. What's the peak gonna be? So I would say Phillip Rivers.
I have a question then.
Uh-huh.
So, because I think that you just hinted at a big talking point when it comes to the rankings of quarterbacks within the NFL, which is this concept of, should we look at the overall team success in our evaluation of the quarterback?
It's a gradient.
I think so too. I think that there's nuance with it.
Yes.
And I think that that comes to mind more whenever we're having the Justin Herbert conversation, where it's like, some of those, I understand, yes, he didn't perform exceptionally well. The comeback specifically, that game, I attribute a lot of that to Brandon Staley and his decision-making and the offensive scheme.
Yeah.
They stopped. They took their foot off the pedal offensively, and defensively, they couldn't stop anything. They just completely shut down. They went into a mode of, we won, were good, and that permeated their offensive defensive scheme, and they never switched it back on.
Yeah.
That is a coaching decision. Last year, Justin Herbert had a bad game. But the point that I'm saying of all of this is to say that in terms of who is better, Justin Herbert or Phillip Rivers, I think that Justin Herbert overall is going to be considered a better quarterback because what has Phillip Rivers done? I think that the gap in talent more than makes up for the gap in success.
Fair. I won't even necessarily press the issue, but like is Justin Herbert 10 years from now, or am I going to have to deal with people calling him, oh, he was like Dan Marino? Like, that would be ridiculous because that's the one that always gets thrown out anytime.
I'm sure, yes.
We don't need to have, I could have a whole Dan Marino discussion. I love talking about Dan Marino. Everyone loves to use him as the example because tragically he never won a Super Bowl. And so anytime you have a quarterback that's considered to be talented or have had some level of success but never won a Super Bowl, it's Dan Marino. Dan Marino changed the sport of football in the way that the quarterback position was played. Dan Marino was throwing for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns when other guys weren't even cracking 4,040. So let's pump the brakes a little bit. But anyways, Phillip Rivers.
All right. Well, whatever. Moving on to a guy who you could, I feel like actually not necessarily, I guess like not the same, but if you're going to make a comparison between modern day Dan Marino, the better option or guy to pick is Josh Allen. And we're going to be comparing him to Eli Manning. Because this, and I picked this purposely.
Yeah.
Because this is an interesting conversation. Eli Manning has 2 Super Bowls
against the GOAT parent right now, against who is considered to be the greatest football quarterback of all time.
Josh Allen, in terms of Super Bowls, has done jack squat and couldn't beat the best quarterback within the era. And so, yes, he has the MVP. Yes, he has the talent. So really what this really comes down to is how do you view Super Bowls in terms of your quarterback rankings?
I'll say this right now, and this is something that it's a weird little tangent that might not go anywhere. I think
classic Jonathan tangent.
I think that there needs to be a deeper look into how we discuss Super Bowls and quarterbacks within era when you're within the same conference as compared to a Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is in its own little world where it's 2 weeks separated from everything else, and it's the best of one conference versus the best of the other conference, at least through the machinations and everything that happens in an NFL playoffs. So, and I don't even know which side of that I would fall on. I feel like Josh Allen gets more grace, and deservedly gets more grace, for losing to the greater quarterback of his era within his conference than if it was consistently happening in the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So, like Eli Manning in 2 one-off Super Bowls beats Tom Brady. Cool. And I'm not taking that away from Eli Manning. The point of all this is to say that I feel like this is a weird moment for me where I'm actually defending Josh Allen. I would pick Josh Allen in this area because I feel like he just has this roadblock of a quarterback that's consistently in his way in his own conference. And one of these days, he's going to get one. I mean, I would take if the over-under's 0.5, I'd take the over on Josh Allen Super Bowl wins. So, yeah, this is to prove, based off your last question, I'm not purely basing it off of the success of winning Super Bowls. I think there's other nuance. The nuance with the previous question is I don't think Herbert is that good. And the nuance with this question is I think Josh Allen is really freaking good.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you because I'm actually strongly in the boat of we can't just look at one Super Bowl, one playoff game in order to determine, you know, overall
Yeah,
how
also
good this
Eli
player
Manning,
is.
outside of those 2 Super Bowl runs where he won the Super Bowl, didn't win a playoff game.
Yeah,
He
he
made
just like
the
put it
people don't
together right at
realize,
the right
like, he
moment.
made the playoffs other times, of course. Outside of those 2 Super Bowl runs, he never won a other playoff game. That's pretty
And that's
crazy.
why he's the GOAT.
Is he a Hall of Famer?
Oh my gosh. That's a good question. I don't even know. I haven't thought about it enough, but that is a really interesting point.
Josh Allen is
Okay.
a Hall of Famer, though.
You think so?
Yeah. Now that
You think already?
now that he got his MVP, well, he plays for 3 more seasons to have the full career longevity. Maybe he makes a Super Bowl, not even necessarily wins one. If in the next 3 years he makes a Super Bowl and then he has the MVP on his record, then yeah, he would sneak into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I guess my question is like the only reason I'm saying that is just to say like what do you mean by that? Do you mean that like if he retired now he'd be a Hall of Famer, or do you mean like you think eventually he'll get to the point where he will be?
I actually think no, if he retired now, he wouldn't be, because if he retired
That's
now
what I
and
was
he has
saying.
the
Yeah, that's
7-year
kind of where I was
waiting
pushing back
period
on
and
that.
we look back, it'd be no. But I think give it 4
Yeah.
more years, 3 to 4 more years of playing time, even if he doesn't win another MVP or even a Super Bowl, I think as long as he
Yeah.
has that same level of success, he would sneak in.
I agree with you. Alrighty. Next pairing, Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson.
Aaron Rodgers. It's pretty
Yeah,
easy.
it's Aaron
I
Rodgers.
and
Yeah, it is.
you got to make the comparison somewhat, but like I can't even rage bait, even though I'm a Lamar Jackson truther and lover.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that Lamar Jackson, like his current trajectory, is pretty good in terms of MVPs. Aaron Rodgers has what, 4?
Yeah.
Like,
No, here's the
what are you
thing.
gonna do?
If Lamar Jackson retired today, he's obviously a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he is.
There's not a single player in NFL
There's not
history.
a lot of guys that have 2.
Not a single one. And there's
Yeah.
never been a player that would have won 2 in MVPs and not been a Hall of Famer. I mean, as soon as he got that second one,
he
it was a
definitely would be.
lock.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that wasn't as much discussion as I anticipated, but that's okay. Yeah, I guess like it is pretty obvious. All right, next one. I don't even know if I want to say it, but I'm just gonna say it. Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes?
Pass.
I'm making you.
Listen, I'm not delusional. Tom Brady is the GOAT as of right now. I think that now, if I said the mere fact that Mahomes has a path to overtake him, that would make a lot of people mad right now. But there is a path. There are multiple paths, actually. You can't say at this point in Mahomes' career, when he hasn't even turned 30 yet, and he has 3 Super Bowl wins. I also saw this really dumb clip. I don't even know who it was, so we don't have to get into a fight with anyone. But I saw someone, talking about how, Mahomes, has lost 2 Super Bowls already. It was this whole thing where it's like, do you guys realize that Tom Brady was 3-2 in his first 5 Super Bowls, right? like the concept, like we're dealing with the exact same playing career, and in fact, Mahomes is ahead of pace. Even with the last Super Bowl loss, he's ahead of pace. He has more MVPs right now than Brady did. He has more Super Bowl wins right now than Brady did.
Yeah, I think that. How many MVPs did Brady end up getting?
2.
2, right? Okay. So like in my mind, with this conversation, I'm
really sorry. 3. I apologize, because he won it in 07, 10, and 7 and 17.
I thought so. Yeah. So like I think that I think that there's a really strong possibility that at some point Patrick Mahomes will have another MVP. I think that in terms
decent chance
the
it's
problem
this
is, though,
year.
is that yeah, good chance, exactly. The problem is though is that it is hard for me to imagine him getting that many Super Bowls, and that's the discussion. Like, the reason why, and we've talked about this before, but I'm like not entirely convinced that Tom Brady is the GOAT. And the reason why
I know.
is because I don't heavily favor these types of Super Bowl or like Super Bowls when you look at the context of those wins. But if you are simply looking at Super Bowls, like, I cannot say that Patrick Mahomes is going to get that many.
It's not simply just looking at
so it's
Super Bowls. There's other stuff around it. And I know that there's more nuance. Just to be clear, the NFL discussion needs people like you, Adam. We need people to stand up to even to people like me. Like, we need you in fighting the good fight.
Listen, dude, like, you can't look at that Super Bowl in Tampa Bay and be like, he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT. Like, no, like, that was a complete sell of the Chiefs offensive line because they lost like all of their starters at the back end of that season due to injuries.
And also
like,
the whole narrative.
Patrick Mahomes outplayed Tom Brady by one of the widest margins that I've ever seen in terms of the difference between two quarterbacks playing in the Super Bowl. Like, it wasn't close.
And also, I mean, and in the other time that Brady beat him in the playoffs in Mahomes' first year starting in 2018, Mahomes outplayed Brady in a way like you couldn't even, like,
by far.
You can't even, the only thing that you could say is, oh, Brady got the win. Like, if you break that game down by any other metric, any other way you want to look at it, Mahomes played one of the greatest games that he could have.
And I'm not even necessarily talking about like them together. Like, obviously the talent disparity is vast. What I'm saying though is that, like, in terms of Super Bowl wins, looking at Tom Brady, like, you can break Tom Brady's career into 3 different eras, right? The first era is he was picked late. He was okay, good enough for this incredible defense to carry him to Super Bowls. Not okay. He was great, right? Like, he was incredible, especially relative to his draft position. Let me not get ahead of myself. But he was not the focal point of that team that was leading to Super Bowls.
No,
right?
Not at all.
Then we see this real big resurgence within his career, right? They go undefeated and lose in the Super Bowl. They get Randy Moss. He starts winning MVPs, and they don't win. And then once they stop winning Super Bowls, he gets into this third era. So I guess there's really 4, but he gets into this third era with Gronk and Edelman, where finally, he's kind of on the decline from that peak and prime within his career, but there's still enough pieces where he's able to get those Super Bowls back into place, again, with an incredible defense. And then he goes to Tampa Bay with an incredible defense and incredible weapons and a great offensive line, and again, wins the Super Bowl. So I'm not saying that to say like he shouldn't be within the conversation. I'm saying that to say that there is context to his career, which is that the best Tom Brady ever was, he never won a Super Bowl. Like, there is not a clear correlation between Tom Brady's individual success and the team's broader success.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I'm just saying, like, we have to keep that in mind whenever we're having this conversation.
Another quick little tangent, and then we can move on, is...
I don't want to move on. This is getting me fired up.
The rewriting of NFL history that's already taking place and will continue to take place with Belichick and Brady, and how it was all Brady and not Belichick. I like how you knew immediately where I was going with this. Like, just watch the Patriots versus Rams Super Bowl. Like, I mean,
3-10. 3-10. That was the most boring Super Bowl ever, and that was the Rams revolutionized offense.
We could have had Mahomes versus Breeze.
The season where it was like a 51-49 game.
Yeah, we could have had or not even Mahomes Rams. We could have had Mahomes versus Drew Brees, because remember, that was the Rams Saints penalty game.
Yes,
we could have had a Patrick Mahomes versus Drew Brees Super Bowl, and instead we were forced to watch 10-3 defensive masterclass by Belichick.
Listen, you need to look up. Exactly. I'm telling you right now, leave this video and go look up a breakdown of Bill Belichick stopping that Todd Gurley run game. Because if you remember, that was the season Todd Gurley went ballistic in fantasy. Like, that That was one of the best offenses the NFL has ever seen. That was Sean McVay's like coming out party.
Yep.
That was the year they could not be stopped. And in the Super Bowl, they scored 3 points because of Bill flipping Belichick. Like, I'm just saying, like, this guy was incredible.
He was the GOAT. He's the GOAT. Bill Belichick is the GOAT.
He's the real GOAT. Also, never mind. I'm not going to say that. But yeah, no, the rewriting of history too, in terms of like people now liking Tom Brady and the Patriots as a whole. Like, did you see that whole storyline of like him like rizzing up Sidney Sweeney? And people were like, oh, he has so much aura, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you hated him. Like, everyone hated him. Let's continue the hate of the Patriots dynasty. Why are we stopping?
The one nice thing about it is that it just gives me hope that maybe people will look back on the Chiefs fondly now.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in all of sports.
Yeah.
Like, James Harden is all of a sudden starting to get beloved. Like, people hated James Harden with what he was doing with the penalties.
Well, it's coming around on Curry, although to be fair, I'm coming around. I was wrong for my Stephen Curry hate.
You hated on Steph Curry?
Oh, I was a big Steph
You're
hater.
such a hater, dude.
Let's move on. Well, I don't want to get into it.
Okay, fine. All right, last thing. So I'm going to name an NFL team, and I want you to tell me if they should rebuild or keep going. So basically, this is kind of getting into this discussion. Whoa! Are you embarrassed that you just did that and it's going on the internet?
Listen, it's late, man, and we're talking about NFL rebuilds. What else am I going to do?
Yeah, I guess. That's true. But basically, just the whole concept of should teams fully commit to a rebuild? And so what I mean by that is, should teams make one or a number of moves that clearly changes the trajectory or direction of the team in order to sacrifice the present for the future? So I'm going to name some teams, and let's just talk about real quick if they should rebuild or keep going in the direction they are currently on. First up, we got the Dolphins. This is interesting because this is inherently tied to the Tua conversation.
It's inherently tied to the Tua conversation and the Mike McDaniels, I should say, Mike McDaniels conversation. Yeah. The two of those together makes it hard because if you do rebuild, you are essentially more likely than not getting rid of Mike McDaniels, because I don't think he's done enough to preserve himself from a rebuild, even though I think he is a good head coach. And yet, where are you going with this? Tyreek Hill's going to be gone soon. The weapons are from where they were 2 years ago when we were all excited about the young, hot Dolphins weapons. Yeah, I think you have to tear it down. There's no point in continuing.
I agree. It's just, I think like you just have to ask the hard question. What is the ceiling? What is the ceiling of a Tua-led offense right now? Their defense, other than their defensive line, is not good, right? So where are you going with this?
Because here's the thing. Who are they going to have to play in the playoffs if they make it? Like, let's say they win if they make it to the playoffs, they're going to be playing at a cold Arrowhead, a cold Orchard Park, or a cold whatever your team stadium name is. What's Cincy?
Paycor or Baltimore.
Yeah, or Baltimore.
One of those four.
Basically, you're going to have to play at
hot weather.
One of those four stadiums, more likely than not, on the road. And if you save and you win one of those, then you're going to face another one of those selections in an AFC championship game. Like, it's not, the ceiling is losing in the divisional round.
Yeah, exactly. And so for that reason, I'm of the opinion that if that is your ceiling, you need to do a rebuild. All right, next up is the Seahawks. We kind of talked about this before. But
no, I think the Seahawks are actually in a retooling right now. I think and we talked about this before. We were both somewhat deceived and misled on what we thought the vision was, and it led us to make some what we would, at least I would now call, and I think you would agree, incorrect opinions about what Seattle was
Yes.
doing.
Yeah.
Where I'm at now, I actually like the trajectory that they're on because Mike Macdonald is going to be secure there throughout this rebuild. And they've got a stopgap quarterback now in Sam Darnold, who they're not paying a significant amount of money. And even if Darnold doesn't pay out, then you do technically have Jalen Milroe waiting in the ring, but I'm not even almost counting that. The point is that the retooling, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, is actually on track right now.
Yeah. And I think that one thing that's kind of changed my mind related to that is kind of a mindset shift related to the likelihood of getting a franchise quarterback relative to where you are in the draft. Like, I think that it just seems like you're just as likely to get that franchise quarterback either through free agency or through the draft when you're kind of in the middle compared to when you're high up. Like, obviously,
Yep.
there's just so much like unknowns related to, how a prospect is going to translate within the NFL. That it's just one of those things where it's like, if they can stay competent and they can, like if Sam Darnold, like best case scenario is this kind of and I think best case scenario is next season, he is just like somewhere, like towards the upper end of what he showed us last year with the Vikings. If he can reach that level, you're talking about a team that is probably pretty squarely within the middle of the NFL. And from that perspective, he can be that kind of guy where it's like next year you draft a quarterback that has potential, high ceiling, whatever. We develop him for a year or two. We thank Sam Darnold for his service, and then he steps in. And now, throughout that period, you didn't necessarily do a rebuild because you still stayed within the middle of the pack relative to the NFL, but you were still able to retool in terms of your weapons and then just continue to build on that great young defense. And so from that's kind of where my mind shift has changed. And I do think, Jonathan, me and you were just really excited about the prospect of a team like fully rebuilding. Like, wow, like this team is going to be trash. And then like our reaction was more emotional because like I want to see that.
we're the sick type of NFL nerds where we enjoy watching a rebuild, and I'm the same way with my NBA fandom too, where there's nothing like a full commitment to a rebuild and just parsing all of the minutia of
that
it all.
That must kill you as a Hawks fan, the most mediocre team in the league. I'm sorry.
Hey, we got Tingus Pingus. So,
Tingus Pingus.
I am so in on Tingus Pingus, man. He's gonna be healthy just for us. He actually
listen, as a Celtics fan, enjoy him.
He was faking
his unknown sickness.
He was faking his post-viral illness.
What did he have? The bubonic plague? Why did no one figure this out?
We're doing an NFL podcast. We cannot talk about Kristaps Porzingis postseason illness.
Yeah, but like we haven't been able to talk about basketball, and so much has happened. Like, what was that? But anyway, okay, I'm sorry.
And to put a button on the Seahawks one, we buried the lead a little bit by talking about the fact that also Mike Macdonald is an incredible head coach and will be an incredible developer of that young defense.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Absolutely. Okay, next is the Steelers.
Yeah, rebuild. Tear it all down.
I think so.
Tear it all down. Do it. Tear it all down. Literally, I want the Steelers organization to have like it's an intervention style, and they pull Mike Tomlin into the room and they just all chant rebuild, rebuild, rebuild. And I want that on video, and I'll cherish it for forever. Tear it all down. They need to. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think so. Does that include firing Mike Tomlin to you?
It shouldn't, but it kind of has to.
I know. Yeah,
although it wouldn't be firing him, they would trade him.
Trade him to the Bengals? This might be crazy. I'm trying to think.
It's not going to happen.
I would put... No way. I'm just saying, like, what player would I give up? Like, as a Bengals fan for Mike Tomlin? Like, maybe T. Higgins. I don't know if that's crazy, but it's like I might do
Personally,
that.
I would agree with you there just because, again, as we've had the debate, it would mean that you get out of the obligation of the T. Higgins contract paired with Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
I don't know. I just love, like, never mind. But basically, I've talked about this before with the Steelers. I think those who say that Mike Tomlin is the problem there is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, give him crap and expect him to make anything great of it. Like, you have essentially, like, it seems like the front office is working against him and his ability. Like, it's as if like they've bet against his ability to have a winning record and they keep losing, and so they're just like, well, how about now?
Yeah.
So it's like
he's turning crap into straw, and you're pissed it isn't gold.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Alrighty, last team, the Cowboys.
No, because what would the point be on this Dak contract? You have to play out this Dak contract.
Yeah, that's a good point. You do.
So
you're kind of stuck.
Well, you could use the word stuck. You could use the word overjoyed because Dak Prescott is an elite quarterback. No, to be clear, that is mostly sarcastic, even though I am a Dak defender. But yeah, no, you're going to be paying Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott. You got a new head coach. And even not just talking about this season, but for the next 3 years, a rebuild by the Cowboys would be unconscionable.
Yeah, agreed. Alrighty, well, I think that's it. That's all I had planned.
Great episode today, guys. Adam, it's your turn. What player do you need to tell the audience to go watch highlights of?
So we kind of talked about Jaden Hicks and just like those big hit players. I'm going to say Sean Taylor. Sean Taylor, rest in peace.
One of these episodes, I am going to say O.J. Simpson.
And with that, we'll see you later, folks. Make sure to comment, subscribe, like the video, rate it if you're on Spotify. We do not support O.J. Simpson. See you later.